Hi all, welcome to the Business Analyst Training Program. In our previous session, we have seen details pertaining to system functional design. So in system functional design, we started with the activity diagram, single view of it, vertical swim lane diagram, horizontal swim lane diagram. And then we have seen how to create a sequence diagram based on the sequence of events between two or more activities defined in an activity diagram. And then we've seen what is a use case model. What does a use case model comprise of? It is divided into use case scenario and use case diagram. So what is the difference between a use case scenario and use case diagram? How to create the use case diagram using Visio is what we have seen in detail. Next we have the cross-functional diagram and business process model notation. Following that, we have the system architecture to be defined. We will do it step by step. So we have seen the activity diagram, use case model and sequence diagram. Following that, today's session, we will start with the cross-functional diagram and Bpmn diagram. Where will the cross-functional diagram and Bpmn diagram be used? These diagrams are mainly used to define the present system, proposed system, present process and proposed process. You can use this even in a smaller project, medium-sized project or bigger-sized project. Example of these diagrams can be found in the bigger-sized project document. So if you look at the business requirement document, when you mainly define the business process overview, so while you define the current business process or current system, proposed business process or proposed system, you have to explain the existing process and the existing system and a proposed process and a proposed system using the Bpmn diagram and the cross-functional diagram. Cross-functional diagram is used to define the existing system and the proposed system. Bpmn diagram is used to define the existing process and the proposed process. That's the main difference. Again, I'm repeating it. If you have to define the existing system and the existing and the proposed system, you have to use the cross-functional diagram. If you decide to describe the process, to define the existing process and the proposed process, you have to use the cross-functional interactive diagram. Okay. So we will see how to create the cross-functional interactive diagram or cross-functional diagram. That's much more easier compared to the Bpmn diagram. We will do this step by step. Cross-functional diagram, you can create different types of cross-functional diagrams. One is a cross-functional vertical diagram. Another one is a cross-functional horizontal diagram. And then comes the cross-functional interactive diagram. So you all know how to create a vertical diagram and a horizontal diagram. So you have to use the vertical swim lane and the horizontal swim lane to achieve that. Open an instance of Visio. Okay, you have an instance of Visio opened. Now you have to define which type of a diagram that you would like to create. You can either differentiate between a vertical swim lane and a horizontal swim lane, and you can decide which one is a better diagram for representing the existing process and the proposed process when you're using the Bpmn diagram. In case of a cross-functional diagram, based on the number of functionalities of the system, you can decide how you have to represent the present system and the proposed system. Both these diagrams, be it for the present system or the proposed system, or present process and the proposed process, these diagrams should go into the document. These are not standalone diagrams. These are not just diagrams that you create and save it as a PDF or an image file and then give it to the end user. You have to embed these pictures within the document that you create, be it any type of a document. So we have seen a smaller size project and a medium size project so far, correct? So in both these projects, you have a particular section or a part where you have to define the present and the proposed system, present and the proposed process. So for sure, these diagrams are a must, and you must understand the difference between these two set of diagrams. Click on More Shapes, add cross-functional flowchart shapes. So we have used these shapes, one of the shape within this particular stencil in another diagram. Where is that? In the activity diagram. In the activity diagram, you will not find a horizontal swim lane. So for that, you have to add cross-functional shapes and include the horizontal swim lane. But when you're working on cross-functional diagram, it's much more easier. So you have to just include cross-functional flowchart shapes and of course the basic flowchart shapes, right? So here you will not include activity diagram. This is not an activity diagram. It is a cross-functional diagram. So in cross-functional diagram, include the cross-functional shapes and the basic flowchart shapes. So once you're done with that, always save your diagram. So this is called a cross-functional vertical diagram. Save it. Now we will start to define. So first, on the top you have the heading. So you have to give a description of what is the present system or the proposed system for which you're creating this diagram. So that's the description here. Find below a sample cross-functional flowchart that describes the process of customer placing an order, sales department processing the order, warehouse in charge ships the item to the customer, and also customer care is taken care. So it's a cross-functional flowchart, customer and sales system, vertical view. Okay, so you can also specify if it is a present or a proposed system here in the title. Drag the vertical swim lane. So you have to be careful with this because it will extend the page. So once you drop this, drag it up. Okay, give some space for adding the description. Add as many functions needed, but before that you have to reduce the height of the function so that the other functions will have the same height defined. Drag the functions. So when you have lesser number of functions, you can go for a vertical representation. When you have more number of functions, you have to go for horizontal representation, which I've already explained to you. So this is, double click and type cross-functional flowchart, customer and sales system, vertical view. Customer, sales, warehouse, and warehouse is a place where all the goods are stored. Customer service. It's not data warehouse, okay? When you're talking about online shopping, warehouse means it's a place where all the goods are stored. Now you have to define the workflow. So how do you define the workflow? Customer and sales workflow. This is the phase you're defining. Customer and sales workflow. Okay. So once you're done with this, click on basic flowchart shapes. So these are the second set of stencils or the shapes that you've added to define the flow of tasks or work that is done between each of the system function. So you have to start. Place it here exactly in the center. Place an order. Customer places an order. Place order. Next, sales. There's a process in the sales. So what is that process? Customer's order is reviewed by the sales team and a sales order is generated. Correct? So that's what we discussed the other day. So once this is done, next you have to take a decision. So is the order completed or not? If it is not completed, it goes back to the customer. Otherwise, it continues in the sales function. Send order to the warehouse for fulfillment. The order has been completed. The customer has completed placing the order. No further items have to be added. So next, the sales order should be sent. It should be sent to the warehouse for fulfillment. Means get the goods. Fulfillment is a term that is used for getting goods based on the sales order, based on the goods or the items that are mentioned in the sales order. Add a process. Send sales order to the warehouse for fulfillment. Next, now it is the role of the warehouse. So function of sales completed. So add, check if the item in stock. Is the item in stock? If it is yes, then ship the item to the customer. If it is no, then you have to refund the customer. Generally, refunding is avoided by not showing the product online. If the product is not available, don't show it online. Otherwise, why do you have to create additional steps for refund? Refund should generally happen if the product delivered is not correct or there is a damage. But if there is no stock, don't even take it to the stage of a sales order. Okay, that is the standard step. Then you have to end of the order process. Customer receives the item. This is also end of the order. Customer receives the item. Okay, you've now created the flow. Add the connectors. So you have to check if the item is in stock or not. Refund, close, and send it to the customer. Adjust the shapes accordingly. Okay. And then add the arrow marks. Control A, line, select the standard arrows. So this is done. Next you have to check if this is yes or no. So based on these two conditions, you're taking a decision. Item is in stock. This is for no. Just double click on this line to type the text. Yes or no. That's all. With this, you have completed the cross-functional vertical view. It's very easy to create a cross-functional vertical view. Okay. You have to add a description. Okay, the description has been added. Adjust this. Include the drawing number. So with this, we complete cross-functional vertical view. Very easy to represent the system function. You can use a vertical view to give the overall system functionality description or sub-functions or sub-module wise description, because here you have limited number of functionalities which you can display in one page. If you had more number of functions, of course the page will get extended to the right. So if you have more number of functions, your preferred method of working should be based on the number of functions or the sub-functions that you define. So if you have more number of functions or sub-functions, you can define that using a horizontal swim lane diagram. Save the diagram. Okay, next. You have a horizontal view of the same diagram, so you can create an image of it and you can copy paste it in your document. You have a horizontal view. In the horizontal view, you can take this as an assignment and work through it, because already we have seen the activity diagram. How do you create a horizontal view of the activity diagram? Right, so I'm not going to repeat this. It is the same set of workflow which you've just defined. There you defined it in a vertical way, one below the other, and here it's going to be in a horizontal way, that is starting from the left to the right. Same set of workflow items that you have defined in the vertical representation, which you have to define using the horizontal representation. That's the only difference. Okay, so I will post this as an assignment question and you can work through. Next, cross-functional diagram. This is an interactive view. Interactive view is very, very important. Vertical view and the horizontal view are reasonably easier to understand. But when it comes to interactive view, so why are we calling it as an interactive diagram or an interactive view of a system? It can be a present system or a proposed system. If the interaction between the functionalities of the system are sequential, means one after the other, then it is not an issue. It is very easy to follow. The same thing if it is not sequential. If the first function of the system interacts with the third function, if the second function of the system interacts with the fourth or the sixth function, you can have n number of functions. Generally, the interactive diagram is represented in a vertical manner, one below the other. The workflow is going to be one below the other, and you can have an extension for the workflow. Right? Supposing you have 4 different main functionalities of the system: customer, sales, warehouse, and customer service. The warehouse now gets divided into multiple sub-functionalities. So how do you define multiple sub-functionalities? Processor, get items, quality check, packaging, invoice sticker, move to shipping, carried by shipper. So these are various sub activities or sub functionalities, sub modules that are taken care by the warehouse. So these are referred to as the warehouse functionalities. So in the first diagram here, you will be describing the warehouse details at a high level. But further to that, when there is an issue with the goods that has been delivered to the customer. So what happened? The customer will contact the customer service and then the process starts. Customer is not happy. So in the previous diagram, customer received the item. We stopped it with that. But then after that, you have customer verifies the product. Customer is happy or not. If the customer is not happy, look, the interaction happens between the customer and the customer service. So this is called interactive diagram because the interaction takes place from the first function of the system to the last function of the system. If the customer is happy, then it is yes. And you will end. If the customer is not happy, customer reaches the customer service. Regarding a wrong product delivered. Customer ordered for a particular product and a wrong product has been delivered to the customer. Any type of product, right? Sales received the customer problem details. So customer service forwarded the information to sales because sales processed the customer order. So they're sending it to the sales department for verification. Please check what is the problem. What did you process? Why was the wrong product sent to the customer? So what happens? Backtracking is happening. In the system flow, backtracking is happening to check each and every stage where the item was processed before it's sent to the customer. Sales received the customer problem. Sales verifies the details against the customer order note. So sales takes out the customer order note and checks what is the product. Sales order defined is correct, but the warehouse has processed the sales order incorrectly. It's not the problem of the sales department. Sales order is perfectly done. They have created correct sales order for the product which was ordered by the customer. But warehouse processed the sales order incorrectly and delivered a wrong product. So what should happen now? Warehouse failed in get items function. So where did the warehouse fail? So in order to understand why did the warehouse fail, where did the actual problem occur in the warehouse? Where did it come up? You have to define each and every sub functionality within the main warehouse functionality. So that's where we are giving an extension to the warehouse workflow. In the warehouse, what are the various activities or various functions to be defined? In the warehouse, there should be a processor. Processor means a person who executes the sales order. The person is going to look at the sales order and then the person is going to take a decision on which item to be selected and from which lot it has to be selected. They would have piled it up and they would have placed it one above the other in a stack. So from where to pick it? It can be 10 notebooks and 5 pens. Still, there will be a processor, one who's going to look at the sales order. Okay, 10 notebooks and 5 pens. For notebooks, go and pick it from particular lot. For pens, go and pick it from another set of lot. So that's a person called processor. He's going to look at the sales order, go pick the items, bring it to the table. So processor defines what has to be picked, where it has to be picked from. Get items. There will be one person because a person who's reading the sales order and defining which items to bring and where to bring it from can't keep running around in the warehouse, such a big warehouse, to identify where the product is and bring it. Physically go hand pick the item and bring it to a place where quality check happens to the item. So get item is another sub functionality where there will be an individual who's working in getting items based on the instruction given by the warehouse processor. Quality check. For the item which has been brought by the get items person, quality check will happen. Randomly, quality check is carried out. Then the quality check QC passed. Packaging should happen. So once the item gets packed, invoice sticker should be placed on the package. Finally, the package with invoice sticker and the customer address details is moved to shipping. So it's moved to the shipping lot. From there, in the shipping lot, shipping and logistics unit will decide how to ship the product to the customer based on weight of the package, destination, amount of shipping, what is the shipping amount that has been paid, which shipper is going to ship the product, because they will have a particular time duration within which the shipping should happen and the product should reach the customer. It is finally carried by the shipper and delivered to the customer. So these are the sub functionalities that you have to define in a warehouse. Similarly, within sales, you can have different sub functionalities. Right? We are talking about sales on the whole. But if there is a problem with sales, you can again divide that into multiple sub functionalities, namely who received the customer order, who processed the customer order, who created the sales order, and who executed the sales order. So you can have 4 to 5 different sub functionalities. In the customer service, you can again have different sub functionalities. Customer sent an email, customer called the customer service. Different ways in which the customer has reached the customer service should be identified. And then who created the request, customer request, process the customer request, because not just one customer service person is going to do all of these. There are so many customers and there will be so many customer service executives. So each of the executives will have a different set of tasks to perform. Correct? So this is how you can use the interactive diagram very efficiently. This is going to be much easier for you because you have already created a vertical view. The only difference here is you have to create an extension. Right? So there we stopped it with the product reaches the customer. Here we are having an extension. Customer verifies the product. Customer is happy or not. If yes, end the process. If no, customer reaches the customer service and all other activities are performed. So it is the same thing that we have done previously in the vertical diagram, except for you have another vertical swim lane placed below the actual vertical diagram which you have created. That is the only difference. Within each of these, don't think these are blank. You have to create the workflow. I haven't created a workflow because there can be different types of workflows defined under each of these sub functionalities. So it depends on the type of system that you work. So wherever you are showing an extension from the main function to the sub functionalities, you have to use a dotted line like this. Okay, this is a dash line actually. So you can click on line and you can change this to the dash type. That's all is the difference. This is a text that I've added here. Okay. So you can take this as an assignment along with the horizontal view, because we have seen both the vertical view and the horizontal view. Horizontal view, it's very easy. It's just a conversion of the vertical view. And in vertical interactive diagram, it's the same vertical diagram but with additional steps to add the system workflow extension. That's all. Okay. Do you have any questions for me? So these are 3 different ways in which you can represent a system. The present system as well as the proposed system. Okay. So work on these 2 diagrams. These are equally important. Next, you have to understand what is a Bpmn diagram. So Bpmn is a different type of diagram. You must understand what Bpmn actually means, and then we will see how to create the Bpmn diagram. So you have business process model and notation explanation. So open that. A standard business process, model and notation will provide businesses with the capability of understanding their internal business procedures. So far in the cross-functional diagram, we have seen how to create a vertical view of different functionalities of the system, how to create horizontal view of different functionalities of the system. How do you represent the interaction between one functionality to another functionality which is not adjacent or not in a sequence? First functionality interacts with third or fifth or 10th, whichever. So for that you have to use the interactive diagram, which is very much similar to your vertical view, but you will have system workflow extensions to describe two or more set of vertical swim lanes to represent the workflow. Bpmn is completely different from the cross-functional view. In cross-functional view, you will be describing how the system interacts, mainly the functions and sub-functions of the system interact. That is very, very important, because when a developer looks at the cross-function diagram for a present system, it will be very easy for them to identify what is the problem, right? So how the interaction is in the existing system takes place, and in the proposed system, what is the type of an interaction that you are explaining. For you, it is all about functions. You're representing it as a system function. But for a developer, as I've already shown you, these are not just the system functions. These are codes that they have to write. Each and every system function that you define will be converted into a particular code, right? A function or a method that is written within a class for which an object is created and the function is executed. So for what you define pictorially or diagrammatically, the developer will go through the workflow and then they will write the code just based on the workflow that you define within each of the functions in the system. In the same way, a business process model is very helpful in understanding the existing process, not the system. This is for process. And in the entire Visio, other than your basic flowchart, the only model or the notations that are used to describe a business process is business process model notation, Bpmn, or it is also referred to as Bpm, business process model in short. The only diagram that is used to represent the process model. So Bpmn will provide businesses with the capability of understanding their internal business procedures in a graphical notation. And it is a standard method in which the shapes used in the business process model notation will be understood across the industry. Be it manufacturing, be it aerospace, be it education industry, or it can be publishing industry, or it can be medical industry, healthcare industry. The standard notation that you represent within the business process model is referred to as a standard notation, and the shapes have the same meaning irrespective of the domain for which you're going to represent or describe the process. The graphical notation will facilitate the understanding of the performance, or it describes more about the process. This will ensure that the businesses will understand themselves and participate in their business. So mainly, business process model can have business to consumer or business to business. So I've already given you an example for what is B2b and B2c. These are two important terms that you must understand. B2b stands for business to business. In business to business, you are a company and you're going to sell your product to another company. The other company will set a margin on it and they will sell the product. So it's a business to business. You are a business, you're dealing with another company which is also a business. That's why it's called B2B. In B2C, you're a company and directly you will be delivering your product, or you will be dealing with your consumer or the customer. So that is referred to as B2C. C stands for consumer. B stands for business. So in both business to business and business to consumer model, you have to define the process workflow using the Bpmn notation. So Bpmn is a graphical notation that depicts the steps in a business process. Simple definition. If you have to define the steps in a business process, then you have to use the business process model notation. Bpmn depicts end-to-end flow within a typical business model that you choose. It can be B2B, it can be B2c, or it can be manufacturing to business, or manufacturing to business to consumer, or directly from manufacturing to the business, or manufacturing to the consumer. It can be different types of business models that you can work on. So how different is Bpmn? So why is Bpmn important? It is very much important because there wasn't a particular method in which the process model was done. There were a lot of diagrams, be it activity diagram or a sequence diagram or a UML diagram, use case diagram. So these are all for the system. Mainly you're talking about the system activity, system workflow, system functions, system sub-functions, extension of system process. Good. But where is it for a business process? If you have to talk about a business model, the steps within a process, so what is the type of a diagram that you have to use? And the only diagram that came up with a standard of notations that should be used is referred to as the Bpmn diagram. So who is this Bpmn targeted at, or who's going to use the Bpmn diagram? Bpmn is targeted at a high level for business users and at a lower level for process implementers. So in an organization, similar to your system architecture, solution architecture, business architecture is also important. So we have already seen the definition of business architecture and enterprise architecture right at the beginning of our training program, correct? So that is the basic fundamental information that I've given you of what a business architecture is all about and what is an enterprise architecture, what an enterprise architecture comprise of, right? So Bpmn is a very important part when you define the complete business architecture or when you model the business from both service end and the vendor end. How different is this compared to the UML diagram? Because as a business analyst, you will be working on both business process diagram and UML diagrams. So these are two different modeling languages or notations. UML and Bpmn are the two notations that have the word model. Unified modeling language, business process modeling and notation. So these are the only two main diagram types that are called models because they are standard notations. Every shape used within these two stencils, UML diagram stencils and the Bpmn stencil, will have a specific meaning which is common across the industry, which is standard across the industry. So how should a user who works on the UML understand the Bpmn? Bpmn will mainly be used by process people, Six Sigma, production group, operations group, and of course our business analyst group as well. But as a business analyst or a system analyst or a business system analyst, you can work on both Bpmn and UML. It is not just one set of modeling language that you will have an expertise in. You will specialize in both UML as well as in Bpm models. So as a UML user, UML takes an object-oriented approach to the modeling of applications, while Bpmn takes a process-oriented approach. Where Bpmn has a focus on business process, the UML has focus on software design. So now you will understand the difference. So when they talk about Bpmn, it is more of business process. When they talk about UML, it is more of software design. And therefore, these two are not competing notations or models. They have their own purpose and it is growing or developing in its own way. The Bpmn and the UML are compatible with each other. Combination of Bpmn and UML diagrams will be the perfect match for creating a very good documentation for your software. Right? So that's the explanation for Bpmn and how do you differentiate Bpmn from UML. Why should you learn Bpmn separately when you can create simple flowcharts? Or how do you differentiate Bpmn from that of the UML diagram? Do you have any questions for me? Okay, so now we will see how to create the Bpmn diagram. Open the sample Bpmn diagram given to you. Now you theoretically know what it means. You have an idea of what explanation it carries. Open the sample Bpmn diagram. Open an instance of Visio. So we are almost covering the number of diagrams. Beyond this, most of the other ones will be the practical or it's going to be documentation based. So slowly we will move away from diagram artifacts to document artifacts. Set it on page width. Include BPM basic shapes. It's found within flowchart. Add this. Save this diagram. So this is called a Bpmn diagram. So the shapes are entirely different here. You cannot compare these shapes to the standard ones which you have used, be it an activity diagram, be it an activity diagram or a cross-functional diagram or a basic flowchart. The shapes are different here. So we'll see what is the exact information that you can represent using the Bpmn diagram. So here I've taken two different set of business processes to model. Customer order processing. First, I have the customer within the process. The entire process is called customer order processing. So I have the customer. It's not a function of the system. This is a part of the process. You can call it a sub-process. Customer sub-process. And then sales department, delivery department. So within the process, what happens? Every system that you create as a business analyst, when you work with the software engineer, there should be some domain or some set of steps, process that exists in the backend. Without that, you cannot create a software. So what is the definition of a software? Automating a task. So for that, you need some method of creating the system based on the processes. So when you have to define the process, what is that you have to do? You have to use the Bpmn diagram and define each of the sub-process. So here I have the customer sub-process, sales department, delivery department. And within the delivery department, I have the expansion of warehouse delivery of goods sub-process. Delivery of goods is a sub-process and I have an expansion to show what is happening within that. It is all specific to the process. I'm not talking about a system. I'm not going to talk about a screen here. I'm not mentioning about any web page. It's all the process that I'm going to concentrate on. What happens in the process. Task is used to describe an activity that is included within a process. Gateway. Gateway is used to control the divergence and convergence, means when it comes to a particular point or when it diverges, it moves away. What you have to do, what type of a decision, whenever you have to take a decision in a process, yes, no, true, false. So these are all gateway related. Next you have the intermediate events. First you should start the event, end event. Intermediate events are used to represent some particular event that occurs in the process or when you have an extension to another page. Generally we use start event and end event only. Expanded subprocess, very helpful. It's an activity whose details are visible within its boundary. So when you have to expand a particular subprocess, delivery of goods sounds good, but there are so many activities involved in it, right? So when you have a number of activities involved, you have to describe that using a expanded subprocess shape. An expanded subprocess shape can have different set of tasks involved, but it is a subprocess. Collapsed subprocess, we generally don't use it. When a particular subprocess is not visible, we will keep all the activities, all the processes, sub-processes and steps within the process visible. But there can be some set of steps that should be carried out in the background. You can represent that as a background process in the system, right? But you have to show that as a visible process. Generally, if it is carried out in the background or by some other component which is not visible to the end user, which the end user doesn't interact with or work with, is referred to as the not visible or invisible subprocess. Text annotation, if you have to give an explanation or a description like this, you have to use the text annotation. Sequence flow. Sequence flow is nothing but the connectors that you add. Association is used to connect a process to a subprocess, mainly when you describe a subprocess using the expanded subprocess or a collapsed subprocess. Message flow. There is a message that flows once the customer places an order. So that is represented using the message flow. Message. When a particular message is sent to the customer, the message symbol is used. Represents a communication between two participants. Data store. Store order details in a database. Data object. Send sales order details as a text file. So here there is an object. Text file is an object. It's a data object and that's what you're representing here. If you have to group set of activities or tasks that are carried out within a process or a sub-process, you have to use the group notation. Groups are used to make a conceptual association between multiple elements. Okay, so here is an example for a group. Delivery of goods. After the delivery of goods, sub-processes are executed. What happens? Simultaneously, receipt should be issued and you have to complete the order. So these are two set of tasks that are executed in the process. After delivery of goods, sub-process is achieved. So that's why the grouping is done. Next, pool or lane. So there's only one type of a pool. There is no vertical pool in business process model. Generally, business process models include a lot of tasks. So we will only use a horizontal pool to represent the business process model. That is the main difference between your activity diagram and cross-functional diagram. Correct? There you can have both vertical and horizontal view, but here you can only have a horizontal view and no vertical view when you represent the process model. Any questions with any of these shapes? Now we are going to see how to add these shapes. Give some space on the top and add. First you should always begin with a pool. Add a pool. So you can call it a swim lane or a pool or a lane. It is correct to use any of these terms. So give some space on the top, that's sufficient. Increase the width as needed. Make sure spacing is same to the left and right. Give maximum spacing so it will be easier, otherwise you have to adjust it again and again. Okay, so what is this function called? It's called customers. Next, you need another set of functionality to be defined. So if you want to make any further adjustment, you can do that. Add another pool. You can just copy paste. Drawback, you didn't click in the center. We'll have to click in the center and then paste. Otherwise, page will get extended and it will be difficult. If you think that is a little difficult, you can drag and drop. Again, you have to be careful with the spacing, right? So you have to extend this. So what is this called? You need two different pools. So the page got extended because of the height of the pool that you have added. So keep it like this. Sorry. And add another pool. So now do you see this? This is perfect. And extend. So this is my shop. That is the place where in your company the sales order and the actual procurement takes place. Sales department, and this is delivery department. Procurement means procurement of goods from the warehouse. That's what I meant. So I think this domain is much more easier for you, right? So there isn't anything complex. We all know these kind of activities are carried out because we all do online shopping for all our daily needs, different types of products. Expand it as much as needed. Now, make sure spacing is even to the left and right. Size of the pool should be the same. Okay, this is the first step when you create the external framework. So once this is done, next you have to add or start the process flow. It's not the system flow, it's a process flow. Always remember, when you're working on Bpmn, it is all about the process. Okay, exactly in the center. And then place an order. This is a task to be added. Place order. Next, it goes to the sales department for processing the order. So you have already adjusted it, so you can bring it down. This is process order. That's the process step. In process, it's called a step. Next, once the order is processed, there's a storage. It can be a data warehouse or a database, whatever it is. But you have to represent it using the storage shape. Store order details in a DB. Store order details in a DB. Okay. Next, you have to work on delivery of goods. This is delivery of. So first always prepare the external framework and then you can finish the internal steps to be added. Okay, first we will finish the extension part. Add an expanded sub-process. Give some spacing for the annotation or the description to be included. You can double click. So when you have a particular, so you have to double click. Select the sub-process added, double click. When you do that, you will find a cursor point. You have to type expansion of warehouse delivery of goods sub-process. Select that. Click on home. Increase the size as much as you want. Left align. That's all. Now the sub-process is ready. You can add the tasks and other shapes as needed. Add a task. Read the order item described in the customer order list. So here it should come from the sales order. So you can take it as customer order or the sales order. Read. So read the order item described in the sales order list or the customer order list. So next step, here you should have smaller tasks because there are a number of tasks that you have to describe within the sub-process. So don't use bigger ones. If you use bigger shapes, then it can be difficult to represent a flow within one expanded box. Check if the order items are in stock. Check if the order items are in stock. Next, you need a gateway to take a decision. Yes, no, true, false kind of information. Okay, so add the shape here. If it is in stock, then what you have to do? If it is not in stock, what you have to do? If it is not in stock, then you have to report that the item is not in stock. Report that the item is not in stock. If it is in stock, then handpick the items from the warehouse storage. Handpick the items from the warehouse storage. Okay. Next, send the item for packing. Send the item for packing. Generate price sticker for the item. Generate price sticker for the item. Paste the price sticker on the packed item. Correct? So these are all steps in the process. Only if these steps are regularly followed, manually if these are done in the process, then you can think about the system automation or the system method of automating these manual steps in the process. So first, the base for your system diagram is your process diagram on the packed item. Next, you have generate receipt. Finally, close, end event. Okay, so the external framework is now ready. Within your sub-process, what should happen? That is already added. All you have to do is, you have to add the connectors and finish it. Be slow because these are smaller diagrams. You can either use the sequence flow or generally I would prefer using a connector for this. Okay, here also you have one more. End. So if the item is not in stock, then what much can you do? Nothing much can be done. You have to end. You have to report to the customer, refund and end. So first you have to create the existing process and see where you can make a correction. Report that the item is not in stock. The biggest problem. Why should it even come to the delivery of goods when the item is not in stock? So right at the beginning, don't display the item. That is the proposed change to the process which you can suggest. Right at the beginning, first step, check if that particular item is in stock or not. Two ways of doing. One, if you don't display that item to the customer, you don't have a particular item in stock, why do you have to display it? And why do you have to tell the customer that this item is available? Okay, if you think you have to mention to the customer that the item is available, but currently it is out of stock and notify button can be given, yes, you can do that. But right at the beginning, it has to be done rather than crossing the sales, customer placing an order, sales department in getting involved, and then it moves to the warehouse delivery of goods, and then they find out the item is not in stock, which is incorrect. So in the present process, this is how it works. So in the proposed process, what is the change that you can do? Check if the item is in stock or not right at the beginning when it is getting displayed to the customer. If it is not in stock, say it is out of stock, notify button should then be activated. That is from the system point of view. Notify the customer is the step in the process which you can add to overcome the drawback of the present process. Okay. So you can adjust this, add the annotation simultaneously. Finish one part. If you take one part, finish it completely when it comes to process. So text, you can type or you can copy paste it from Notepad. It's your choice, however you want to work through. Delivery of goods sub-process involves various stages in processing the order, picking the item, packing and price tagging, which is demonstrated in the expanded sub-process diagram of the business process model for the ordering system. Okay. So now we will move on to the delivery of goods. So in delivery of goods, yes or no. So what happens if it is a no? It goes back. And here delivery of goods will be no. So what happens? Refund should take place. Send a message to the customer that the refund has been done. If delivery of goods is yes, if it is positive, successful, then issue receipt, complete the order. So add a gateway. If you create this sequentially, it will be perfect. You won't have any difficulty. Otherwise, this could be troublesome in defining the tasks. Okay, spacing should be the same. So this is issue receipt. Complete the order. Okay. Add a data object here. Send SO details as a text file. You can add the connectors. Finally, you have to end the event here. Okay. So this part is now completed. So if it is a failure, what should happen? Add a task. This is the problem if you don't move on to the pointer tool and do it. Okay, add the pointer tool. Get back to the pointer tool and change this to refund. When it should happen, when it is no. You have to add a text message or a message box. Send message to the customer. So this is for send message to the customer. Back to the pointer tool. That's all. Finally, you have to end. Right? Add the connector everywhere as needed and finish it. So step by step you have to, how the process step flows, in the same way you have to create your diagram. That is the hint to be successful with these kind of diagrams. Observe message flow, how it's added. It will look bigger, don't worry. Add the shape. Attach it to the dots. That's all. And then finally you have the association. These are also bigger ones. Draw and then attach it to the dot. You can make it thicker. So straight. Okay. Now we have to add the arrows. Some of the arrows are defined. That's okay. Some of these are not defined. So wherever you think the arrow should not be there, you have to remove it carefully. So some small adjustments will always be needed. You should be flexible for that. That's all. The diagram is now completed. So step by step, how the process steps flow, in the same way you have to create the diagram. Finally, don't forget to add a title. What diagram, what business process have you modeled? So what have you done? You have actually modeled a particular business process. So that's how you have to define it. With this, we complete the business process model. Okay, don't forget to add your arrow marks. That's all. Simple, very easy, but very, very effective diagram. If you understand the meaning of each of these shapes, the only difference in collapse sub-process is, here this is an expanded sub-process. In collapse sub-process, you have to mention if it is a background process. If it is a background process, you can add a text like this and you can say BG step. It's a background step and you can color that particular text box. You can use a light blue shade or it can be a red shade. Light ones. BG step. It's a background step, which means it is invisible. It is understood. If it's background process, it is invisible in the system. So the same thing will be carried out in your cross function. If it's a background process, it's going to be invisible by default. Okay. Any questions? So far we have seen different types of UML diagrams and the business process diagram. Very important in your BA career interview questions are for sure on these topics. Okay, good. So we have progressed as discussed or as planned. So we are done with most of the system design part. We will see what is left over in the system design, and then we will move on to the system architecture. So as I have told you, system design and system architecture takes some more time in addition compared to the standard artifacts or documents that we will be going through. So our activity diagram, use case diagram, and then we have the sequence diagram. So we have seen all of these diagrams. I'm not going to repeat these. You can go through the document, ASAP project document, for better understanding. Next. In the design phase, you're moving to the next level, that is called functional design. So far, you have been working on the system design and you have described the functionalities, various functionalities of the system, sub-functionalities of the system, process that is used to create the system, sub-processes, tasks in the sub-processes. Good. Now, you have to describe the functional aspect of the design of a particular system. First is the user login. So this is mainly divided into two parts. One is the actual explanation for the functionality of the system to be created. System-based design. How many forms, how many buttons, how many drop boxes, how many radio buttons, check boxes. So that should be defined using the design aspect of the form or the web page. Followed by a representation of a screenshot. It can be a prototype model will have 60-70% working screenshots. Otherwise, there's going to be a wireframe. In wireframe, I've already shown you sample wireframe. So it's going to be a dummy representation of work. Correct? So how did the wireframe look? We will be learning how to create a wireframe using pencil tool in our forthcoming sessions. But this is how it's going to look. This is a dummy representation of the screen. So this can be added as an overview, or how do you visualize the screen or the web page to look, how it should look like. Same way you move on to the next function. So each and every function of the system should have an explanation for what that particular functionality of the system is all about. Then a description of the look and feel of the screen or the web page. How many buttons, how many text boxes, so that you have to describe. And then the wireframe should be added, or a working prototype model screenshot should be added. So if you see here, in the user login form, the user is authenticated and it is used by the application. The user is authenticated based on what? Username, password, user role, department name, project name. All of the above conditions are checked, and only when all of the above criteria are satisfied, the user is taken to the next screen. Otherwise, the user is not taken to the next screen. Correct? There will be a failure message that gets displayed on the screen. Designing of the form. The design of the form should consist of 2 text boxes for entering the username and password, 4 drop downs or combo boxes. These are referred to as drop downs or combo boxes. Now let us see this. So if I, okay, so this is how the prototype looks like. So this is not a wireframe. This is a working prototype model. It's about 50-60% working model, for which I've taken a screenshot. These are text boxes. plain text boxes. So when you log into Gmail or Yahoo or whichever email ID, you have a text box. You have to click inside the text box and type the text. Next you have the drop downs. In the drop downs, so what are these drop downs? When you click on this arrow mark, you will see a number of options available. So you don't, the end user or yourself, you don't have to type anything. You have to select different options. One of the option that is available, one of the value that is available within the drop down. So there are two text boxes, correct? Two text boxes, correct? These two are the ones. 4 drop down combo boxes or combos. So 1, 2, 3, 4. You have 4 different combo boxes. For what? User role, department name, etc. 3 buttons are there available. New user, login and cancel. So what is the purpose of it? New user button. This button takes the user to the new user login form. First time the user is logging in, so he is a new user. Login is meant for multiple times of login, not a first time user. So second time, third time, how many ever times. So that's the submit or the login button. This button is used to authenticate the user by checking the above fields from the database. Correct? Cancel button. This button resets the selected fields. So that's about the cancel button. So this is how you have to describe. First, give an explanation for what that functionality is all about. And next, you have to define the design of the form. If it is a standalone application, mean to say, if it is a client-server architecture, 2-tier architecture or client-server and a middleware architecture or multiple servers, 3-tier architecture, then you have to follow the proper form design. So these are referred to as forms or screens because these are standalone applications. If you're working on a web application, on the other hand, it's referred to as the web application, and each and every form, you don't call it a form or a screen, it's called a web page. Each and every web page should also be described in the same way. And then finally give a screenshot. Okay, define all the functions, sub-functions of the system like this, with supporting screenshots, wireframes as and when needed. We will be looking at the wireframe, how to create a wireframe using the pencil tool in the forthcoming sessions as we progress through the other topics. There are a number of screenshots available here with an explanation for each and every functionality of the system. Please go through this document, only then you will get a very good idea. ASAP web deployment. So in the web deployment, again you have to describe. So what this web page is all about. So this is a screenshot of the home page. Right? You can create a similar view using pencil wireframing tool. We will see how to do that. It's very, very helpful. And when you give such a screenshot, something like this or something like this, it is so easy for the developer to go through the system design. In the system design, the developer will understand the activity diagram, sequence diagram, all types of diagrammatic explanation. Then in functional design aspect, how do you define the functionality of the system? And then how do you give an explanation for various controls? What are all these called? These are all called controls. Text box is a control, C-O-N-T-R-O-L. Controls are found in toolbox. That's for a developer. But for you, understand these are all called as controls. Okay. So this is how you have to give a screenshot of the web pages that you create or the wireframes for the web pages. Okay. So with this, we complete the functional design as well. So overall, so far we have seen the system design. Next, after your system analysis, so after requirement planning and requirement analysis, the next is design phase. So in the design phase, you've selected the tools, and then finally you have worked on the design part of it. Design includes activity diagram, sequence diagram, use case modeling, business process modeling, cross-functional diagrams. And then in functional design, you must know how to define a function or a sub-function, how to create screenshots from a working prototype model or from a wireframe. You have to create screenshots and you have to add it, be it standalone, 1-tier, 2-tier or 3-tier architecture or a web application that you create. For everything, functional design should be it should be described in the document. So the next part that we're going to see is system architecture diagram. So we'll see what is available in the system architecture. So still we are on the ASAP project, which is a medium-sized project. We haven't moved on. So very soon, after completing the architecture part, we will be moving on to the BRD or the business requirement part of it. How do you create the business requirement document? System architecture, mainly you have to give high level architecture and module level architecture. Correct? So in high level architecture, here we will be describing what are the different divisions of the entire project. So this entire project, as you all know, and as we have been discussing, it is divided into data acquisition, data modification, algorithm, data reports, ASAP, web deployment. Correct? So in ASAP architecture, let us see how this diagram should be created. The overall explanation for or the representation for providing a solution to the system from the architectural point of view. Open system architecture. Okay. Open Visio. Page width. Savio diagram. So this is called a system architecture. Click on save. Now what you should do, simple basic flowchart shape is what you need. You can also include basic shapes. Other than this, you also have basic shapes just in case you need that. You need only these two set of stencils to create the system architecture. It's a high level view. This is not the internal view of the system. Internal view of the system will be prepared by the technical architect. As a business analyst, you have to only create the high level view, and for that, basic flowchart shapes and basic shapes are more than enough. So in this entire project, we have raw data to be collected from various databases, text files, flat files, documents. It should be stored in a staging server. From there, data acquisition takes place. So data acquisition is of two types. It's divided into automated data acquisition from the staging server. Staging means all unstructured data from different sources. So it's going to be unstructured. It's not going to be related, right? So data are of three types: structured, semi-structured, and unstructured. Always remember these types of data. Structured means the data is related and properly aligned. Semi-structured means partially it is related, partially it's not related. You've just grouped the columns together with no relationship in it. Unstructured means there is no relationship at all between the columns and you've just grouped it. You've put the columns together. So staging generally contains the raw data which is of unstructured format. Grouping of data is done, that's it. But relating the data and putting The related data adjacent to each other in columns is not done in staging. In data acquisition, data is automatically acquired and manual data addition is also possible. Next, the central part is local database. It can be of any type. The data that you get from the data acquisition, whatever is the selected data that you get from the data acquisition phase, it is moved into a local database. It's not a staging database. It is a local database. Wherever you see the cylindrical symbol, it means it is a database or a data warehouse or a data mart or a data lake. What do you mean by data lake, mart? Why should I know all this? We will see in the database concepts. Very easy to understand. There's nothing complex about those terms. So once the data that you have acquired sits in your local database, from there the data modification starts. Data modification is done in order to cleanse the data, add additional information to the data, remove unwanted information from the data. For example, address of the customer. If unwanted text is included in the address, then that should be cleansed, it should be removed, and then the modified data is used by the algorithm to create the metric or the formula. Finally, data report is also done based on the result that is generated. From the local database data, website can be created. So this is the high level view of the system, or this is the overall solution architecture. It is a solution that you're giving to the problem that the end user has given you. Any questions about what is a system architecture? How different is that from the technical architecture? Okay. Now add a process box, give some space on the top for the description. Add a process box, expand it, and then you have to start including the basic shapes, or here it's a here. Database, rotate it, reduce the height of it, and include it here. So this is for SQL Server. Correct? Next, from where you're going to get the data, you also have the time management data to be picked from Oracle. And then you have Sybase that contains the software development activity information. Productivity details from SQL Server, time management from Oracle, software development details from Sybase. Next, you have an external data to be picked. So use the external data symbol here. External data from a third-party component. Add the data. Reduce the size of it. Excel file input. Flat file input. XML file input. Then you have a document. Okay. Then you have the staging server. So you have the database to be included here. Software main server for staging of raw data. All the raw data that you collect from here should go into staging. Correct? Next. The third part. The third part, you have to add a box. Okay, it is generally box that I'm adding. It's not just the process part, because here I'm not defining any process. I need a box, and that's what I'm adding here. Same height. I can change this to a dash type. But for now, let me add the line shape. Click on search, line, search for it. Okay, so once the lines get displayed, select the lateral line. Here is the lateral line, select that. Back to stencils. Don't forget to save your diagram, possibility of losing the diagram. Now divide this into 3 parts based on your system need. So based on my project need, this is what I'm doing. So you have to decide about your project and represent the architecture. Okay, so I've divided this into 3 equal parts. Now within this, I'm going to define automated data acquisition. Data acquisition. Boxes should be of the same size. Manual data addition. This is a database. MySQL is another database type. This is a local database. Okay, after staging, from the raw data, you're picking only required information and you're putting it into your local database. So you can have n number of such databases. So wherever you have a database, you have to use this cylindrical representation. Okay. Everywhere I'm centering. See, the spacing should be the same. These are all hygiene factors of your drawing. So you have to be very careful. If you miss out on these, your drawing wouldn't look good. So next is the center part and the last part. So what is this? This is for data modification. Next you have the algorithm. Data report. Okay. Finally, you have the website. Website, generally I use a cube to represent the website. If at all there's going to be a website or a web application, you can use a cube. It's multi-dimensional, right? So it's an easier way to represent that it is a website. That's all. The overall framework is ready. Now you have to add the connectors and text as needed. raw data, add the connectors, adjust the shapes as needed. Don't convert it into a dotted line right at the beginning. It can be difficult for you to finish the diagram. So you can do it at a later stage once you finish the diagrams. That's all. Okay. Now you can add the arrow marks. Okay, so these lines should not contain arrows. These are separating lines, okay? Even this. So next you have to choose these lines. Hold your control key and choose these lines. Line, dash, select the smaller dash. That's all. It's now completed. You should add an overall border for this. So add a box. Adjust the spacing as needed. Expand it down. Don't worry, it's going to overlap. You have to say send to back. Click on send to back. That's all. So once you're done with this, the next step is click on line, dash and dots. So this is my way of representation. You can use your creativity and you can use different styles to represent. So these again should not contain arrow marks. That's all. This is the completed diagram. Very easy to create the system architecture because there isn't any complex definition here, correct? So you're only trying to represent the overall flow of your system. So what is the solution that you're going to provide in your system and what flow is that going to have? That's the main purpose of creating the system architecture diagram. Okay. Save the diagram. Any questions? Look, it is so presentable. This is how it should be. If you don't give correct spacing, it wouldn't look good. So always fit to window and check if it is looking fine. Okay, if you think the spacing is not even, you can select the diagram and you can slightly move it to the left or right. Okay, that's all. Save your diagram. So even on this view, you can see that the spacing is correct. Save the diagram. Any questions? Good. So I hope you're able to understand what's being explained to you in terms of the system design and functional design. These are very important, even the architectural diagram. So with this, we complete most of the design aspects and the architectural diagram needs of the document. So whatever you have defined here in the architecture diagram, you should give an explanation for it. Each and every part that you've defined in the architectural diagram, You have to give an explanation. Next, you move on to description of modules. Each and every module should be described. So what do you do? Smaller diagrams will be created. Similar to system architecture, module level architecture diagrams have to be created. You'll take one part and you will go explain that in detail using same basic flowchart and basic shapes. And then you have to give the theoretical explanation for each and every module diagram, module based system architecture diagram that you define. So this is called module architecture. The previous one is for the entire system. So that's called a system architecture. The next part is for module level architecture. You have to describe each and every module and give an explanation for what architecture or what solution you're going to provide within that particular module of the system. So this is done for each and every module. Every module is referred to as the module architecture in this part. Diagram followed by the explanation. Even for web, you should have a web architecture, web module architecture. Okay. So that completes the system architecture part. So far, we have seen introduction in a medium-sized project, how to write the introduction, system analysis, development tools, system architecture that comprises of the complete system architecture and module level architecture, system design that includes activity diagrams, use case diagrams, sequence diagrams, Bpmn diagrams, cross-functional diagrams. Functional design, each and every function or sub-function of the system should contain the functional explanation, description of the function, design of the form or the web page with various controls that you will be using, and a screenshot of a working prototype or a wireframe. That's what should go into the functional design. Implementation concepts. It is the fourth phase of your SDLC, correct? First phase, you've completed requirement planning and requirement analysis. Then design phase, and then comes the implementation. So implementation concepts are completely technical. So the implementation concept should go into the document by the technical team or the developer or a system analyst. BA cannot work on the implementation concepts. Okay. From a database point of view, you can enter some information about schema or database, but database administrator is responsible for the schema details. Tests, results, and discussions from your testing team. Inputs that comes from the testing team. Documentation from the testing team. Documentation from the development team goes into implementation concept. Documentation from database team goes into schema and database concepts. Documentation pertaining to testing activity goes into the testing part of the document. So there isn't much that you can do, but testing you can also contribute as a business analyst. Finally, data visualization. If you're analytics team or as a BA, you can also work on this, correct? In creating various visualizations. So these are different types of visualizations that are created, right? So these are sample visualizations which you would have created to support your development activity. Okay, we will see how to create these using Tableau. So this is a draft spend analysis presentation which I've created. So here you have a very good representation using different chart types, graph types, and different maps. So these are all various representations that are available within Tableau. So here is an explanation of supposing your tool has to explain more about the quality aspect or spend analysis or spend information, different types of visualizations for that matter. So you can use graphical representations to do that, which can in turn be used by a developer to create the actual screens. So simple BI tools that are available in the market can be used to create mockups or visualizations which can be used to create the actual screens in the software. Okay. So you have the summary report. So you can say this is how the summary report should look like. So based on this, the developer will go ahead and create the actual summary report look and feel, the view using different tools. So here's another way. This is in the previous map you have seen different symbols that are used. It's a circular way of representing. In this map you will see filled. This is a filled map. Okay, in this filled map you will see filling in various locations based on the data that is selected. So we will see this in detail when we go through Tableau at a later stage. But these are different types of visualizations. So again, this is the overall world map and this is within the United States. So very good look and feel of how the actual screen should look, how a summary report should look, mainly summary reports. These are all sample ones which I have created. Very good representations. And it's easy to understand what it actually means. Okay. This is a stacked symbol. There's so many ways you can create visualization. So these are all the end results that the software has to produce. So if you can create a visualization like this and you can give it to your developer, nothing like it. It's going to be very, very handy. Or you have the analytics team who can do this for you. Either ways, but you will also learn how to do all of these, because to see it is complex, but within a few minutes you can finish these kind of diagrams in Tableau. Finally, you have the conclusion part. You have future enhancements to be made, next version release, what you will do, bibliography, references, what you have referred to, which document, which website, and list of definitions and acronyms. Here in Appendix A, I've given a list of definitions and acronyms. So here you can go through the definition for each and every metric, right? So quality metrics are equally important. As a BA, if you know it, it is very helpful to you. So definitions are given here for each and every metric, which we have seen in the first part of the document. So you can go through each and every definition that is explained here, and it will help you a lot. Appendix B, it's about some connections, additional information that you get from the development team. Okay, so with this, we complete the ASAP project. Medium-sized project is now done. So next, what we're going to do is we will move on to the bigger size project, where each and every functionality is described using a separate type of document. You will not have the business requirement, functional requirement, and your system design, everything put together. It's all going to be broken down, and you will have different set of documents for each and everything in the project. So generally, getting to work on short projects, smaller size projects could be for RAD development, not much. Medium size project is possible, but not very frequently. 2, 3 months, 4 months project. Generally, a business analyst will be employed for bigger size projects. So now you have an understanding of how a smaller size project is, how a medium size project documentation is, and now you're familiarized, or you are now used to some of the terminologies that should be used as a part of the documentation. So now it's going to be much easier for you to understand how do you break a bigger size project into multiple documents: business requirement document, functional requirement document, software requirement specification document, technical spec, use case specification, website requirement specification. So these are all the different levels in which the document is broken down into. We will see that step by step. To begin with, we will see what is a business requirement document or a BRD. So generally, they will use the term BRD, FRD or FRS. FRD stands for Functional Requirement Document. FRS stands for Functional Requirement Specification. Okay. Good. So in the next session, we will finish the BRD. Only thing that is left over here in the system functional design. The bigger part of the entire training program, which takes a lot of time to explain the concept, because this is the base, this is the foundation or the fundamental for you to move ahead from the requirement phase to the design phase, and what is the input that you can give to an implementer or to a developer for the implementation process, right? So we've spent good amount of time in understanding how to create different system design, how to create the functional design, what is an architecture, how to create system architecture, how to work on the module architecture. We will wind up the system functional design part 3 with BRD document, business requirement document, and then we will be moving on to data modeling that completely explains the SRS, that contains details of how to create a logical data model, how to work on the data dictionary part, how to identify data elements, what do you mean by data types, how do you create a data flow diagram, how do you create the state transition diagram. These are all equally important when it comes to the SRS and the data modeling part of the documentation. After that, we will move on to BA techniques and BA perspectives. Okay. Good. So we are moving as planned. With this, I'm done with the topics that I had to discuss today. Open to questions. Do you have any questions for me? We are also done with most of the templates. Okay, good. I will post the assignment question, mainly cross-functional diagrams. I want you to practice the horizontal view and the interactive diagram. Okay. With this, we will come to an end to today's session. Thank you so much. And I have given my inputs about the assignment solutions which have been added to the blog. If there is a rework, please correct that and send it. Those which are approved are good enough, need not rework. Please submit your assignments. Your scores are being given to Mr. Sunil. Good. Let's all meet in the next session with more number of topics. You have a good day. Take care. Bye.